In a blow to an already struggling industry, the Forestry Cooperative Research Centre, which is based in Hobart, has been knocked back in its bid for a further 5 years of federal funding. The state government says the centre's work is critical for the industry's restructure as planned under the Intergovernmental Agreement. Forests Minister Brian Green has called on the federal government to reconsider the decision. I spoke to the Chief Executive of the CRC, Gordon Duff, this afternoon. Gordon Duff, I understand you were pretty shocked. You thought that your submission would be successful, and of course it couldn't have come at a worse time for an industry, many would say, already on its knees.
Yes, we were taken by surprise. We know we'd put together a very competitive bid. We had a lot of very strong industry support for the bid, as well as support from governments and government agencies right around Australia. We've got a world-class team of scientists, and some really fantastic people doing some really good work. And the case for our bid for funding really was that the industry is in transition. It's a critical time to really shape the future and look for innovation and opportunities there in the forestry sector. And we think we made an extremely good case for the research that would underpin that future. So it came as quite a surprise that the funding wasn't made available.
How reliant is the centre on federal funding?
Well, the centre is a cooperative, so it's got elements of university and CSIRO and industry support and state government support. But the Commonwealth funding, the CRC program, is really the glue that holds all those elements together. It's probably 25–30% of the total funding and resources that we have to work with. But without that Commonwealth funding, we can't leverage all of the other players to work together on those issues. And
you mentioned industry there as quite a significant player and a significant funder. Will it be difficult to make up that $23 million shortfall given their dire straits? Well,
certainly putting the bid for extending the funding together was quite a challenge. I mean, we engaged with pretty well all of the companies that grow forests and work with forest products around Australia. And despite the difficulty that the industry faces at the moment, there are a lot of challenges, including export markets and the high Australian dollar, those parties were prepared to put funds on the table to assist the research, but on the understanding that the federal government would play their part.
Well, so, are they going to put up now?
That remains to be seen, Ellie. I mean, we really need to go back to our participants and discuss what our next steps will be. I think there's a lot of willingness out there amongst the industry participants and the research providers to look to alternative strategies.
So what is the future of the CRC come June next year?
Well, the current CRC will certainly wind up in June, and we'll be looking at alternative models for keeping a lot of that research and that capacity going. We've got a number of key areas that are unique to Australia of research and development, and if the CRC disappears completely, we'll lose that capacity. So we're going to be working very hard to find ways to at least sustain some of that capability, but it is going to be quite a challenge.
What sort of job losses are we talking about, and how many of those will be in Tasmania?
The CRC currently provides funds for around 50 full-time equivalent scientists and also supports something like 65 PhD students and research students around Australia. Around about 40% of the activity is based in Tasmania. Now, in some cases, we don't fully fund those salaries. We might share the costs of salaries with other organisations like CSIRO or the university. So we'll lose that equivalent, probably 25 positions from Tasmania. A lot of those people will go elsewhere. I mean, they're a very capable group of researchers. They really are world-class researchers. There's a lot of demand in overseas countries in some of those fields, so we'll lose them to overseas or to other industries.
What impact do you anticipate this is going to have on the broader industry as there is this move away from native forest logging into the plantation industry, where a lot of research has been focused? What are the impacts going to be?
Well, obviously plantations are going to have to carry a lot of the load and the supply of wood for the future of future needs in Australia, particularly in construction and housing. Our research, which is ongoing work, is really the only research in Australia that looks at the best ways to grow and breed and manage those plantation resources so they can be used for those higher value applications. So I think we'll find ourselves in the situation very quickly where we're trying to proceed to a future based around a plantation resource, effectively blindfolded, without the R&D to really guide the way as to what species to use, how to manage them in the ground, and then how to process them once they're harvested.
What can you sort of demonstrate and give us an example of just what the CRC has contributed in its 20 years?
Sure. Well, it's certainly done a lot of work in terms of how we value add to plantation resources, either improve productivity, growth, reduce impact on the environment, improve yield from plantations. We've done a lot of work on issues like forest health, and particularly more efficient ways of managing and monitoring forest health, including pests and diseases. Our work is on forest harvest and transport has really improved energy efficiency enormously in terms of particularly transportation of logs and use of harvest equipment. We've got recent case studies that show we've improved or reduced the costs of harvest and transport by 10% for some companies just in the space of a year, which, when you look at the overall expenditure on harvest and transport in Australia, it's about $1 billion annually.
You say you were shocked and that you thought you'd put together a good submission. Does it feel like the federal government has it in for the industry?
Look, I wouldn't put that interpretation on it, Ellie. The process we're involved in was a competitive process. At this stage, we haven't had an explanation as to why we weren't successful. That explanation will be forthcoming. The only news we've had is that we haven't got that past that stage in the process.
Just finally, Forestry Tasmania have said that it will leave them as the only organisation, in fact, doing research here in Tasmania. Is that what are the consequences of that?
Yeah, well, certainly Forestry Tasmania have a dedicated forest management research group which does extremely good work, and they do collaborate with scientists at the university and CSIRO. So Forestry Tasmania will need to look at the situation with the withdrawal of CRC funding and make their decisions about how they go forward. But there is no question that our capacity in Tasmania to work on sustainable forest management and value adding and use of plantation resources will be greatly diminished by this failure of funding.
Gordon Duff, we're out of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ellie.